At my college graduation party, my father publicly humiliated me by toasting to my sister's vague new job instead of my degree. He claimed she was the real success. So, I decided to stop quietly paying their crushing mortgage. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The sharp, metallic clinking of a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute echoed through the cavernous, rented banquet hall, cutting through the low murmur of 30 guests. I had paid for that flute. I had paid for the expensive, imported vintage champagne bubbling inside it. I had, in fact, paid for the entire sprawling graduation party out of my own depleted pocket, cleverly disguised as an anonymous merit award and graduation gift, rooted through a supposedly wealthy alumni networking group at my university. I was utterly, profoundly exhausted. A dull, heavy stress migraine was pulsing violently behind my eyes, the physical culmination of 4 relentless years of grueling double duty. I had spent countless nights studying until dawn for my advanced degree in finance, while simultaneously working brutal, 70-hour weeks, rising through the ranks to become a senior financial consultant. I felt physically fragile in that moment, my hands trembling slightly against the crisp white tablecloth as I held my own glass of sparkling water. My stomach churned with a mixture of fatigue and desperate anticipation. I just wanted a moment of acknowledgement. A single, fleeting moment where my family looked at me, really looked at me, and recognized the absolute mountain of hardship I had climbed to sit in this chair today. My father, Robert, stood at the head of the long, lavishly decorated table. He cleared his throat loudly, his face flushed with a jovial, easy confidence that I hadn't seen on him in years, not since the dark, terrifying days before I had secretly stepped in to save them from total ruin. The room of extended family members, neighbors, and casual family friends grew quiet, turning their collective attention to him. I managed a weak, hopeful smile, adjusting the sash of my carefully chosen, conservative navy dress. This was it. The moment I had been visualizing during every late-night panic attack. Family, friends, thank you all for gathering here today in this beautiful venue, my father began, his voice booming with a forced, theatrical cheerfulness that filled the room. He held his glass high, the venue's chandelier catching the light in the crystal. We are here today for a celebration. A celebration of hard work, of stepping out into the real world, and of achieving truly great things in life. I felt a small, hard lump form in my throat. I lowered my gaze to my plate, feeling a rare, overwhelming moment of vulnerability wash over me. I had waited so long to hear those words of validation from him. But, my father continued, his tone suddenly shifting, dropping the formal, emotional warmth and adopting a bright, enthusiastic pitch that felt entirely out of place. He turned his body, completely angling his shoulders away from where I sat at the designated guest of honor's seat. He pointed his glass directly toward the opposite end of the table. While a college degree is a nice little milestone, let's be honest with ourselves here. We all know that the sheltered classroom isn't the real world, so tonight I want to make a special, very important toast. Let's celebrate the real success in this family, your sister's new job. The room seemed to freeze in time. The air was violently sucked out of my lungs. I stared at him, my vision blurring at the edges as the room began to spin. The real success. My mother, Susan, sitting immediately to his right, nodded vigorously, her face glowing with absolute, undeniable pride. She began clapping loudly. A bright, wide smile plastered on her face, entirely ignoring the fact that the massive, expensive banner hanging right behind her head literally read, "Congratulations on your advanced degree, Maya." To Chloe. My father cheered loudly, beaming at my 24-year-old sister who was already standing up, pushing her chair back to take an exaggerated theatrical bow for the crowd. I sat perfectly still, paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the moment. The silence in my head was deafening, entirely drowning out the sudden, polite applause erupting around the table. It was a physical blow, a sharp, twisting, agonizing pain in my chest that made me nauseous. But it wasn't just the betrayal of my parents. Seated directly to my left was my Aunt Brenda, my mother's sister, whose sharp, calculating eyes had always meticulously tracked every perceived flaw or failure in my existence. Aunt Brenda leaned over to the guest sitting next to her, not even bothering to lower her voice over the sound of the clapping. "Well," she whispered loudly, her tone dripping with venomous, unchecked satisfaction, "at least she earned it. Maya just sat in an air-conditioned library reading books for 4 years. Chloe is actually out there hustling and making a name for herself." My hands gripped the edges of the heavy wooden table so tightly my knuckles turned a stark, pale white. My degree was the culmination of endless sleepless nights, sacrificed friendships, ruined health, and sheer, unbreakable willpower. But worse than the blatant insult to my education and my career was the profound, staggering hypocrisy of their incredibly comfortable lives. They were eagerly celebrating a mirage, entirely oblivious to the secret foundation of their own day-to-day existence. The betrayal was worse than the years of silent sacrifice. The rest of the toast was a chaotic blur of ringing ears, flashing cameras, and shallow, panicked breaths. As soon as the polite applause finally died down and the uniformed catering staff, whom I had personally hired, vetted, and paid a premium for, began clearing the uneaten salad plates, I abruptly pushed my chair back. The wooden legs scraped harshly and loudly against the polished floor, but in the loud, buzzing, celebratory atmosphere centered entirely around my beaming younger sister, nobody even glanced my way. I was a ghost at my own celebration. I retreated. I didn't just walk. I practically fled, navigating blindly through the maze of large round tables until I reached the dimly lit, blessedly quiet hallway leading toward the venue's restrooms. I leaned heavily against the cool, textured wallpaper, pressing the palms of my sweating hands flat against the wall to ground myself. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, frantic and erratic. I closed my eyes tightly, and instantly the dark memories came rushing back to me, violent, vivid, and entirely uninvited. 4 years ago. The terrifying, thick envelopes containing red-lettered foreclosure notices from the bank. The hushed, panic-stricken, tearful arguments between my parents in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. The sheer, unadulterated terror in my mother's eyes when the word bankruptcy was finally spoken aloud in the harsh light of day. They were drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, completely underwater on a massive mortgage they had recklessly refinanced far too many times to fund a lifestyle they absolutely could not afford. I had been 22, just starting my career as a junior analyst, but I was brilliant with numbers. I saw the grim, undeniable reality they fiercely refused to face. They were going to lose the family house, the leased cars, their social standing, everything. So I took over. I quietly hired a discreet lawyer, set up a complex blind trust, and began funneling an astonishing 70% of my income into saving their lives, framing it legally as an anonymous charitable intervention. Maya. My eyes snapped open. My mother, Susan, was standing at the far end of the hallway. She didn't look concerned. She didn't look worried about her eldest daughter rushing out of the room. She looked deeply annoyed, her perfectly drawn brow furrowed in that familiar, stinging expression of mild disappointment she always reserved exclusively for me. "What exactly are you doing hiding out here in the dark?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly in the empty, carpeted corridor. She walked toward me, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply. She was wearing a stunning, incredibly expensive new silk dress, a dress paid for by high-interest credit cards that I secretly monitored and paid down to 0 on the first of every single month. "I just needed some air," I managed to say, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to control it. I tried desperately to swallow the massive, choking knot of emotion lodged in my throat. "Mom, it's my graduation party. The party for my degree. Dad just toasted to Chloe's, whatever it is she's doing." In front of everyone, he completely ignored me. My mother sighed. an exaggerated, heavy, theatrical sound that was clearly meant to convey her profound, endless exhaustion with my supposed dramatics. She crossed her arms defensively, the heavy diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist catching the dim overhead light and sparkling mockingly. "Oh, Maya, please don't be difficult today of all days. You know how hard Chloe has been trying to find her footing in the world. This is a massive step for her. You should be lifting her up, not pouting in a hallway." A massive step, I repeated, absolutely incredulous, my voice rising slightly. "Mom, I just finished 4 years of advanced, grueling finance studies while working a demanding, full-time corporate job. I am a senior consultant at a top firm, and Dad literally called my sister the real success for getting a job as what is it even called? A lifestyle coordinator." "Hey, don't use that condescending tone with me," my mother snapped, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing with cold anger. "Your father was simply making sure your sister didn't feel left out in the shadow of your little academic achievement. You've always been so incredibly selfish, Maya. You get your fancy degree, your little piece of paper, and you expect the whole world to stop and bow down to you. Real life isn't found in a textbook. It's about making connections, about thriving and surviving in the real world. Chloe is finally doing that. She's saving us." I stared at her, the breath completely knocked out of my lungs. "She's saving us." The words hung in the stale air of the hallway, a poisonous, unbelievable, earth-shattering lie. I watched in stunned silence as my mother haughtily adjusted her expensive necklace, radiating the arrogant, untouchable confidence of a woman who believed her crushing financial troubles had magically vanished through the grace and networking of her youngest daughter. She turned on her heel, her silk dress swishing, and began to walk away, totally dismissive of my pain, eager to return to the golden child. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I remained standing alone in that dimly lit hallway for a long time after the echo of my mother's footsteps faded away. The devastating words, "She's saving us," repeating in my mind like a broken, mocking record. The sheer, astronomical scale of the delusion was breathtaking. To truly understand the profound depth of this betrayal, you have to understand the agonizing depth of my silent, unwavering devotion. When the foreclosure crisis hit our family like a freight train 4 years ago, I didn't just casually help out with a few grocery bills. I systematically, ruthlessly dismantled my own youth to build an impenetrable financial fortress around them. I drove a beat-up, 10-year-old sedan with a rattling engine while they blindly kept their luxury leased SUVs. I lived in a tiny, drafty, depressing studio apartment with a messy roommate, eating cheap rice and beans for dinner, entirely so I could maintain the enormous, crippling monthly deposits into the blind trust. I explicitly instructed the high-priced lawyer managing the trust to carefully frame the intervention as an anonymous philanthropic debt relief program designed for struggling middle-class families. I did this specifically because I knew my father's immense, incredibly fragile pride would never, ever allow him to accept charity, especially from his own daughter. I gave them peace of mind. I gave them their dignity. I gave them their lives back. And then there was Chloe. I finally pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked back into the bright, noisy banquet hall. The party was in full swing now, the music slightly louder, the chatter more animated. And holding absolute court in the very center of the room was the primary architect of my current misery, my younger sister. Chloe was 24, impeccably styled, and radiated a toxic aura of effortless, completely unearned superiority. She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than my first semester's tuition, laughing loudly at a joke Aunt Brenda had just made. Chloe's newly acquired profession, lifestyle coordinator, was a completely fabricated, utterly meaningless title for essentially being a glorified personal assistant, errand runner, and party planner for a minor, local socialite. It paid almost nothing, offering 0 benefits and 0 security. But Chloe possessed a highly dangerous, incredibly effective talent, the sociopathic ability to spin a narrative and manipulate reality. About a year ago, Chloe had accidentally intercepted a piece of mail regarding the house's mortgage, a generic, mandatory update from the trust's legal team addressed to my parents. She didn't understand the complex legal jargon, but she clearly saw the words debt relief program and balance paid. Instead of asking logical questions, Chloe, in her infinite capacity for manipulation, began dropping calculated, insidious hints to our desperate parents. She started casually mentioning her wealthy, highly influential friends. She began telling our parents, with a wink and a smile, that she had pulled some major strings with a shadowy, major financial backer to get the banks off their backs for good. She never claimed it directly on paper, expertly avoiding any legal lies, but she painted a masterful, airtight illusion that her incredible networking skills had magically paused their massive debts. And my parents, desperate for a miracle and always eagerly looking for any excuse to view Chloe as the brilliant golden child, swallowed the lie whole without a single chew. They didn't question the logistics. They didn't ask for a shred of proof. They just happily accepted that their beautiful, popular youngest daughter was their ultimate savior. I walked slowly toward the catered buffet table, attempting to keep a low profile and just get a glass of water, but Chloe spotted me immediately. Her eyes lit up with that familiar, predatory gleam she got right before she went in for a kill. She abruptly excused herself from Aunt Brenda's side and practically glided over to me, holding a small, elegant plate of imported cheeses. "Maya, there you are, hiding as usual," Chloe said, her voice dripping with artificial, saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering critically and judgmentally on my modest, off-the-rack dress. "You missed the rest of Dad's toast." It was so incredibly sweet of him to highlight my new career trajectory in front of everyone. "I heard the beginning of it, Chloe," I said quietly, keeping my voice perfectly level, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing my hands shake. "Congratulations on the coordinating." Chloe laughed, a high, tinkling, grating sound that clawed at my nerves. "Oh, Maya, it's so much more than just coordinating. It's about high-level networking. It's about moving major money, creating incredible, exclusive opportunities. Honestly, you should let me look at your resume sometime. Sitting in a depressing gray cubicle crunching boring numbers all day is just so stagnant, so small-minded. Maybe I could introduce you to some of my elite clients. They're always looking for, basic, entry-level accounting help." I looked down at her perfectly manicured, expensive acrylic nails, then slowly brought my eyes up to her smug, glowing face. She was standing there, confidently offering me a degrading entry-level position at a job she barely understood, completely unaware that the very ground she proudly stood on, the expensive catered food she was currently eating, the warm, secure house she slept in every night, was entirely funded by the exact, basic accounting she so casually and viciously mocked. "Speaking of money," Chloe leaned in closer, suddenly dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, a greedy, feral light suddenly dancing in her eyes. "Since you're finally done throwing away money on all those expensive night classes, I was thinking you could chip in for my celebration trip to Europe next month. I'm thinking Paris, Milan, maybe Monaco. Mom and Dad are totally tapped out right now, obviously. And since you don't really have a social life or a boyfriend to spend your boring salary on, it would be a really great way for you to finally contribute to the family for once." Chloe's entitled, arrogant demand for European vacation money rang in my ears, bouncing around the inside of my skull like a heavy stone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there in the brightly lit, expensive banquet hall that I had secretly bankrolled, staring at her perfectly glossed lips and her mocking, triumphant eyes. "Contribute to the family," I repeated, the words tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "Right, because I have been so utterly useless to you all." Chloe rolled her eyes dramatically, an exaggerated, theatrical sigh escaping her lips. "Don't do this, Maya. Don't play the victim. It's just money. You have a decent little job now, you don't pay rent to a husband, and it would show Mom and Dad that you actually care about our family's success and well-being." I turned away from her without another word. I walked straight out of the double doors of the banquet hall, leaving my own graduation party behind. The heavy bass of the celebratory music was instantly muffled behind the thick, insulated glass doors. The cool, damp night air hit my flushed cheeks, providing a stark, shocking contrast to the stifling, oppressive atmosphere I had just desperately escaped. I walked across the massive parking lot, my heels clicking loudly against the asphalt, until I reached my car. I unlocked my 10-year-old battered sedan, the one with the perpetually squeaking fan belt, the chipped windshield, and the faded blue paint, and slid into the cold, ripped fabric of the driver's seat. For a long, completely silent 20 minutes, I simply sat there in the dark parking lot, staring blankly at the dimly lit, green numbers on the dashboard clock. My hands gripped the cracked, peeling leather of the steering wheel with such white-knuckled force that my joints ached. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of Chloe's demand echoed relentlessly in the cramped, freezing space of my car. Contribute to the family. I had sacrificed the entirety of my early 20s on the altar of their financial ruin, draining every ounce of my youth and energy, and she wanted me to fund a luxury vacation to Milan. It was in that exact, quiet moment, sitting in a broken-down car I absolutely refused to upgrade so they could comfortably keep their heated leather SUV seats, that something inside of me finally, irrevocably snapped. The infinite, bottomless well of daughterly guilt and desperate obligation completely dried up in an instant. It was replaced by a cold, calculating, and razor-sharp clarity. I started the rattling engine and drove straight to my cramped, depressing, third-floor walk-up apartment on the bad side of town. I didn't even bother turning on the overhead lights when I walked through the door. I threw my keys onto the counter, walked straight to my small, incredibly cheap particle board desk in the corner of the living room, and flipped open my secure, company-issued work laptop. I swiftly bypassed the complex dual authentication screens to access my deeply private, heavily encrypted financial files. There it was, the folder labeled Horizon Relief Trust. I clicked open the master ledger. Row after row of meticulously documented, unarguable transfers filled the glowing screen. 4 years of my life, quantified in stark black and white numbers. $287,412. That was the exact, staggering, sickening amount I had silently bled out to keep a luxury roof over the heads of people who couldn't even manage to look me in the eye during a graduation toast. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number I knew perfectly by heart. It was incredibly late, well past standard operating hours, but I knew he would answer. "Marcus," I said, my voice eerily, terrifyingly calm as my attorney answered on the second ring. "It's Maya." "Maya, it's nearly midnight." Marcus's deep, professional voice came through the speaker, laced with genuine, immediate concern. He was the only person on earth who knew the full, unvarnished, ugly truth of my situation. "Is everything all right? I thought tonight was your big graduation dinner. You should be out celebrating your degree." "It was," I replied flatly, staring blankly at the glowing blue screen of the trust portal, tracing the massive numbers with my eyes. "Marcus, I need you to draft the revocation paperwork. All of it. The primary mortgage payments, the secondary auto loan subsidies, the revolving credit card clearings. I want the Horizon Relief Trust completely dissolved, and I want the legal veil permanently lifted. I want every single banking institution and creditor notified that the anonymous third-party philanthropic intervention has officially ceased, effective immediately." There was a long, heavy, loaded silence on the other end of the line. Marcus had fiercely advised me against this complex arrangement from day one, repeatedly warning me that secret, silent martyrdom rarely ends in gratitude and almost always ends in bitter resentment. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Maya?" Marcus asked softly, abandoning his lawyer persona for a moment. "If we pull the plug now, the legal suspension on their massive arrears instantly evaporates. The banks will immediately reinstate the original, crushing debt load, plus the accumulated penalty interest on the paused accounts that the trust hasn't officially settled yet. They will be facing total, unavoidable financial collapse within 30 days. They will lose everything." "I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life," I said, my voice harder than diamond, devoid of any hesitation or pity. Prepare the documents. And Marcus, I want every single bank statement, every wire transfer receipt, and the original binding legal agreement proving that I am the sole, exclusive financier of the trust printed out. I want it all placed in a very thick, very visible binder. Consider it done. I'll have the drafts ready for your physical signature by tomorrow afternoon, Marcus said with a heavy sigh. I'm genuinely sorry it came to this, Maya. You deserved better. Don't be sorry, I whispered, closing the laptop with a decisive, echoing snap. They are about to get exactly what they earned. 2 days later, my phone buzzed aggressively on my desk at work. The text arrived at 2:14 p.m. while I was in the middle of a complex risk assessment for a major corporate client. Mom, we need to speak. Come to the house at 6 p.m. sharp, mandatory family meeting. There was no hello. There was no how are you, just a cold, imperial summons. I stared at the harsh black text on the screen for a long, quiet minute. A year ago, a message exactly like that would have sent a massive spike of pure, unadulterated anxiety straight through my chest. I would have instantly started panicking, mentally cataloging every possible thing I could have done wrong. But today I felt absolutely nothing. Just a deep, profound weariness mixed with a growing, icy, unstoppable resolve. I calmly finished my risk assessment, saved my intricate spreadsheets, and packed my sleek, black leather briefcase. I arrived exactly on time, pulling my terrible car into the sprawling, perfectly manicured driveway. I walked through the heavy, custom mahogany front doors, stepping onto the pristine, polished hardwood floors that I had secretly, painstakingly saved from foreclosure. The massive house smelled of expensive, imported vanilla candles and fresh, overpriced floral arrangements. My parents were sitting perfectly posed, like rigid statues, on the plush, white sectional sofa in the expansive living room. Chloe was pacing furiously back and forth across the expensive Persian rug, holding her phone like a loaded weapon. Aunt Brenda was conspicuously absent, likely off spreading the ridiculous gospel of Chloe's fictional, massive success to her neighborhood bridge club. It's about time, my mother snapped the absolute second I walked into the room, not even bothering to offer a greeting or stand up. She crossed her arms tightly across her chest. Sit down, Maya. We need to have a very serious, very long conversation about your completely unacceptable, deeply embarrassing attitude at the party. I didn't sit. I walked slowly to the center of the room and stood directly behind one of the expensive leather armchairs, resting my hands calmly and lightly on its back. My attitude? I asked neutrally, keeping my face a blank, unreadable mask. Don't play dumb with us, my father interjected, his voice stern, loud, and deeply authoritative. It was a domineering tone he had completely, embarrassingly lost during the terrifying depths of the bankruptcy scare, but had miraculously, arrogantly recovered the very moment he thought he was financially safe. Chloe told us exactly what happened in the hallway. She graciously, kindly offered to let you help with her career-building networking trip to Europe. It was a chance for you to finally step up, be a supportive sister, and contribute to this family, and you just turned your back and walked away from her. You embarrassed her, and you embarrassed us. I embarrassed her. I let out a short, dry, utterly humorless laugh that echoed sharply in the large, high-ceilinged, opulent room. Dad, have you actually stopped for 5 seconds to look at reality? Did you even ask her what this so-called career building actually entails? Did you ask her for a single, verifiable pay stub? Chloe stopped pacing instantly. She spun around to face me, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second in genuine, naked panic before her features violently hardened into a mask of aggressive, manufactured outrage. How dare you? You have absolutely no idea what I do. You sit in a depressing gray cubicle all day looking at boring numbers. You don't understand the high-end networking world. You don't understand influence. You're right, Chloe. I don't understand it, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet, terrifyingly steady whisper that commanded the entire room. I slowly unfastened the brass clasps of my black leather briefcase. So, because I love this family so deeply, I decided to do a little bit of basic, entry-level research to help my boring, numbers-obsessed brain understand your massive success. I looked up your incredible, elite socialite boss. I pulled out a thin, neatly stapled manila folder and casually, deliberately tossed it onto the heavy glass coffee table. It landed with a soft, authoritative smack that made my mother jump slightly. "What exactly is this garbage?" my mother asked, eyeing the folder suspiciously, pressing her back firmly against the sofa, refusing to lean forward and pick it up. "That," I pointed a perfectly steady, manicured finger directly at the folder, "is a certified printout of the public internship listings for Glamour and Grace Lifestyle Management. It explicitly, thoroughly details the day-to-day responsibilities of a so-called lifestyle coordinator. Fetching dry cleaning, picking up iced coffees, organizing petty cash receipts. It is a strictly unpaid 3-month trial internship meant for college freshmen. There is no salary. There is no high-level networking. And there is absolutely, certainly no massive, corporate-sponsored European vacation budget." Chloe's face drained of all its color, turning a sickly, pale, desperate white. She lunged forward aggressively, snatching the folder off the glass table and crumpling it violently in her shaking hands. "This is fake. This is completely outdated, manufactured information. You are so incredibly, pathetically jealous of me that you're literally fabricating documents just to tear me down in front of Mom and Dad." "Jealous?" I asked, maintaining unwavering, deeply uncomfortable eye contact with her frantic, lying eyes. "I make a massive 6-figure salary, Chloe. I have an advanced degree. I don't need to fabricate anything. I'm just purely mathematically curious how an unpaid coffee intern is magically, inexplicably convincing major national banks to pause a $500,000 mortgage." "Enough." My father exploded, slamming his heavy hand down hard on the glass coffee table, making it rattle dangerously loudly. He stood up, his face flushed red with pure, blind fury. "I will not sit here in my own home and listen to you slander your sister. Chloe has been working absolute miracles for us behind the scenes, dealing with incredibly powerful people you couldn't even dream of speaking to. You are bitter, Maya. You are petty, you are jealous, and you are bitter. And until you can learn to be grateful and respectful for what she's done for this family's survival, I don't want to hear another single word out of your mouth." I stared at him. I stood there, silently absorbing the absolute, pure, undeniable insanity of his aggressive defense of a total, transparent fraud, while he stood under a luxury roof paid for entirely by my blood, sweat, and destroyed youth. He was violently, actively choosing the comfortable, beautiful lie over the difficult, painful truth. "You want me to be grateful?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling not with sadness, but with absolute, unrestrained, volcanic fury. "Fine. I won't say another word about her little job." I closed my briefcase with a sharp, echoing snap, turning to walk toward the door. "But I promise you this, Dad. You are going to find out exactly how many miracles Chloe can actually perform when the money runs out." The following week was a silent, grueling masterclass in psychological warfare and meticulous, ruthless legal preparation. After the disastrous, screaming confrontation in their lavish living room, my parents completely, totally cut off all communication with me. They ghosted my texts, aggressively ignored my phone calls, and even explicitly, formally uninvited me from a casual Sunday family barbecue through a highly passive-aggressive group text message sent by Aunt Brenda. They were frantically doubling down, completely isolating and exiling the toxic, jealous, older daughter to fiercely protect the fragile, beautiful, imaginary illusion of their golden child savior. It was exactly what I needed them to do. It gave me the uninterrupted, beautiful silence I desperately required to finalize the trap. I spent every single evening sitting in Marcus's high-rise, glass-walled downtown law office, painstakingly reviewing the colossal stack of legal and financial documents he had meticulously compiled. The binder was massive, nearly 3 inches thick, heavily bound in black leather. It contained the complete, undeniable, chronological, airtight history of their financial salvation. Every single bank statement. Every wire transfer confirmation. The original, heavily redacted letters sent to their aggressive creditors by the trust, and the unredacted, master copies bearing my legal, verified signature and social security number as the sole, exclusive funding source. It was entirely airtight. It was completely bulletproof. It was the atomic bomb of undeniable truth. But as we dug deeper into the final accounting to formally close out the trust and reconcile the last few paused accounts, Marcus uncovered something else. Something so incredibly brazen, so utterly devoid of a moral compass or basic human decency, that it actually made me physically, violently ill. "Maya, you need to look at this right now," Marcus said late one Thursday evening, his normally calm voice tight with suppressed anger. He slid a highlighted, freshly printed bank statement across his massive oak desk. He had taken the liberty of running a soft, entirely legal background check on the accounts directly connected to the trust's routing numbers to ensure a clean break. I picked up the paper, my eyes scanning the meticulously printed columns of dates, routing numbers, and transaction descriptions. At first, my exhausted brain simply refused to process the data. It didn't compute. I understood complex market derivatives, international tax loopholes, and high-frequency trading algorithms, but I absolutely could not comprehend the sheer, sociopathic audacity of what I was looking at. "Is this?" I started, my voice catching in my throat, unable to finish the horrific sentence. "Yes," Marcus confirmed, his voice grave, lacking any of his usual professional, distant detachment. "While you were silently depositing over $5,000, a month of your own hard-earned salary into the trust to keep their house out of foreclosure, it appears your sister convinced your parents to open a brand new, high-limit credit card under your father's name. She claimed her wealthy benefactor needed a small, monthly, administrative processing fee in order to keep the massive debt relief program active and running." I felt the blood roaring in my ears, a deafening, rushing, tidal wave of sound. Good faith processing fee, see Hastings. She was charging them. According to these verified banking records, she has been maliciously siphoning roughly $800 a month from your parents' extremely limited, pathetic cash reserves for the past 10 months, Marcus explained, pointing a heavy pen at the highlighted numbers. "She's been using it to pay for designer clothes, expensive dinners, and, presumably, actively padding her European vacation fund. She wasn't just stealing the credit for your agonizing sacrifices, Maya. She was actively, criminally abusing them financially under the exact guise of saving them." A cold, terrifying, absolute calm washed over my entire body, freezing my veins. It was one thing to steal my credit. It was one thing to be lazy, manipulative, vain, and utterly useless. But she was actively financially abusing our desperate, gullible parents, using the very fragile lifeline I had thrown them as a weapon to bleed them completely dry. She was a parasite feeding off a corpse I was desperately trying to resuscitate. "Are the revocation documents fully finalized?" I asked softly, carefully, delicately placing the highlighted bank statement back onto the heavy wooden desk. "Signed, sealed, and legally, irrevocably binding," Marcus nodded slowly, tapping the thick black leather binder with his hand. "The absolute moment I send the electronic notification to the banks, the Horizon Relief Trust is officially, permanently dissolved. The legal suspension on their massive arrears will be lifted instantly. The creditors will issue immediate, highly aggressive, unavoidable demands for the total past due balances. They will have nowhere to hide." "Don't send it yet," I instructed, my eyes fixed intently on the thick black binder, my mind working at 1,000 miles an hour. "I don't want them getting a sterile, confusing, legally worded letter in the mail on a random Tuesday. They wouldn't believe it. They would just blindly assume Chloe's imaginary billionaire friend made a clerical error, and she would spin another web of lies." I pulled out my cell phone and opened the family group chat, the exact one I had been deliberately, cruelly excluded from for over a week. My thumbs flew across the glass screen, crafting the single most important, manipulative message of my entire life. "Mom, Dad, Chloe, Aunt Brenda, I know tensions have been incredibly high lately. I've done a lot of deep soul searching this week, and I realize I have been completely wrong about absolutely everything. I was jealous and I was petty. I want to make things right. I want to officially celebrate Chloe's incredible success and her upcoming trip. Please join me for dinner this Saturday night at the Capitol Grill, my treat entirely. I have a very large, very important surprise for all of you. It's time I finally stepped up and contributed to this family. I hit send, watching the little green bubble appear on the screen, a digital Trojan horse entering their lives. Within 60 seconds, my phone buzzed violently. It was an immediate reply from my mother. It takes a very big person to admit when they are wrong, Maya. We graciously accept your apology. We will see you Saturday at 7 p.m. Please ensure you dress appropriately for a high-end restaurant. I looked up at Marcus, a cold, utterly humorless, terrifying smile slowly spreading across my face. Send the electronic notifications to every single bank on Saturday night, Marcus, I said quietly, savoring the absolute finality of the words. Exactly at 8:00 p.m. The heavy, polished brass doors of the Capitol Grill swung open, and the incredibly thick, luxurious carpet completely absorbed the sound of my footsteps as the maitre d' led us to a large, semi-private booth in the back of the elegant, dimly lit restaurant. I had arrived early, wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored charcoal business suit that felt like psychological armor. My parents and Aunt Brenda arrived exactly at 7, their faces set in tight, uncomfortable masks of forced politeness. Chloe, however, swept into the restaurant a few minutes later like a conquering queen returning from battle. She was wearing a stunning, aggressively bright red designer cocktail dress that she absolutely could not afford, carrying a pristine white leather handbag that I instantly recognized from her fraudulent bank statements. Well, this is certainly an improvement over that depressing catering hall, Chloe announced loudly as she slid into the plush leather booth directly across from me. She didn't offer a greeting, immediately snatching the heavy, leather-bound wine list from the center of the table. I assume since this is your grand apology dinner, Maya, we are celebrating properly. I'll take a bottle of the Camus Cabernet. Actually, make it 2. Order whatever you like, Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously soft, keeping my hands folded neatly on the crisp white tablecloth. Tonight is entirely about revealing the truth of our family's success. My mother offered a tight, patronizing smile, reaching over to pat Chloe's hand. It really takes a lot of maturity to admit when you've been childish, Maya. We are all just incredibly relieved that you've finally decided to stop this jealous streak and support your sister's journey. I didn't reply. I just slowly checked my watch. It was 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the digital guillotine dropped. For the next 15 minutes, I sat in total unnatural silence as they enthusiastically ordered massive, dry-aged steaks, imported truffles, and the ridiculously expensive wine Chloe demanded. Aunt Brenda spent the entire time loudly bragging about Chloe's supposed upcoming itinerary in Milan, while my father beamed with ignorant, manufactured pride. I simply watched them, a cold, detached observer studying a doomed ecosystem. At exactly 7:58 p.m., the waiter cleared our appetizer plates and retreated into the shadows. I reached down to the floor, lifted my heavy black leather briefcase, and placed it squarely in the center of the table, directly pushing the breadbasket aside. "What are you doing?" my father asked, his bushy eyebrows furrowing in sudden, sharp annoyance. "We are having a nice dinner. Put your work away." "I told you I brought you here for a surprise, Dad," I said, the absolute stillness in my voice finally causing a ripple of unease to cross his face. I unlatched the briefcase and pulled out the massive, 3-inch thick black leather binder. I dropped it onto the table with a heavy, resounding thud that rattled the expensive crystal wine glasses. At exactly 8:00 p.m., my father's cell phone let out a sharp, aggressive chime. A second later, my mother's phone buzzed violently against the wood. Then, a second, more urgent chime echoed from my father's suit jacket. "What in the world?" my father muttered, pulling his phone from his pocket. I watched his face closely. I watched the exact, precise moment the color completely drained from his cheeks. His jaw fell slack. He stared at the glowing screen as if it were a venomous snake. This is a mistake. The bank just sent a massive, automated alert. They're saying the debt relief suspension has been instantly revoked. They're demanding the entire past due mortgage balance immediately, 30 days or they seize the house. It's not a mistake, Dad, I said quietly, reaching forward and flipping open the heavy cover of the black binder. There is no billionaire benefactor. There is no magical networking program. Chloe has never saved this family from anything. I turned to the very first tab, pushing the heavily documented, notarized paperwork across the table toward him. 4 years ago, I hired a lawyer and established the Horizon Relief Trust. Every single month, I have quietly funneled $5,000 of my own salary into paying your mortgage and keeping you out of bankruptcy. Read the signature at the bottom of the master agreement, Dad. Read the name of the sole financier. My father's trembling hands reached for the paper. He stared at my bold, black ink signature, his breathing turning ragged and shallow. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, a choked, horrified gasp escaping her throat. Aunt Brenda sat completely frozen, her eyes wide with shock. But Chloe said. My mother stammered, tears instantly welling in her terrified eyes. Chloe lied, I stated, my voice echoing with the crushing weight of undeniable truth. I turned to the second tab, pulling out the highlighted banking statements Marcus had printed. I slid them directly in front of my father. And she didn't just lie to steal the credit for my agonizing, silent sacrifices. She actively, maliciously stole from you. Chloe tried to stand up, her chair screeching loudly against the floor, sheer panic contorting her features. Don't listen to her. These are fake. She's trying to ruin me. Sit down, my father commanded, his voice a sudden, booming roar of absolute, terrifying authority that shocked the entire table into silence. He looked down at the highlighted statements. 10 months ago, I continued, staring directly into Chloe's terrified, guilty eyes, Chloe convinced you to open a new credit card to pay a fake processing fee to her imaginary boss. Instead, she has been charging $800 a month directly to your name to fund her designer dresses and this ridiculous European vacation. She has been committing credit card fraud against her own desperate parents. The silence that followed was apocalyptic. My father stared at the irrefutable, undeniable proof of my lifelong sacrifice, resting directly next to the undeniable proof of Chloe's sociopathic theft. The illusion shattered completely, leaving behind nothing but the cold, harsh, devastating reality. He slowly looked up from the papers, turning his gaze toward Chloe. There was no love left in his eyes, only a profound, bottomless disgust. "Give me the card," he whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying, suppressed rage. "Daddy, please, I can explain." Chloe started to cry, real, desperate tears of a cornered manipulator. "Give me the card." He roared, slamming his fist onto the table so hard a wine glass tipped over, spilling red wine across the white cloth like a bleeding wound. Trembling, Chloe reached into her expensive, stolen white handbag, pulled out the sleek platinum credit card, and dropped it onto the table. My father picked it up, pulled a silver money clip from his pocket, and meticulously, violently snapped the plastic card directly in half. He threw the pieces onto the table. "You will pack your things tonight," he said, his voice cold and definitive. "You are out of my house by morning. You will never, ever ask me for a single dime again. Get out of my sight." Chloe didn't argue. Stripped of her lies, totally exposed in the harsh light of undeniable reality, she grabbed her coat and practically sprinted out of the restaurant, leaving her untouched $300 wine behind. The restaurant manager had hovered nearby, clearly alarmed by the shouting, but Aunt Brenda, finally realizing she was entirely on the wrong side of history, quietly paid the massive bill in a desperate, pathetic attempt to smooth over her years of snide remarks. The immediate fallout was brutal, but entirely necessary. My parents were completely, utterly broken. They sat in the booth, weeping openly, entirely crushed by the sheer weight of their own blind arrogance and the crushing reality of their reinstated debt. They begged for my forgiveness, their apologies tumbling out in endless, shameful waves. "I forgive you," I said calmly, looking at their tear-stained faces. And I meant it. The heavy, suffocating burden of unspoken resentment had completely vanished the moment the truth was finally revealed. But the dynamic changes today. I am no longer your silent, endless checkbook. I will use my professional network to help you legally restructure this debt. I will help you sell the house and downsize into a sensible, affordable apartment. But you will live within your actual means, and I will never hide my success to protect your pride again. They nodded frantically, deeply humbled, entirely willing to accept whatever harsh terms I presented. As for Chloe, her ultimate downfall was swift and completely self-inflicted. I didn't just expose her at dinner. I used every single resource at my disposal to ensure justice was permanently served. I had Marcus formally submit the heavily documented proof of her fraudulent processing fee, charges directly to the credit card company's fraud department. Because she had initiated the charges under false pretenses and actively deceived the account holder, the bank immediately launched a formal investigation into elder financial abuse. Facing the very real, terrifying threat of felony fraud charges and massive legal fees, Chloe was forced to completely drain her precious European vacation fund just to hire a desperate defense attorney. She moved into a cramped, depressing studio apartment with 3 roommates, finally forced to take a grueling, minimum-wage retail job just to survive. A few months later, I sat alone on the quiet, sun-drenched balcony of my brand-new, beautiful high-rise condo. I had finally moved out of the depressing walk-up. Using the massive influx of cash, I was no longer secretly sinking into a black hole to finally invest in my own life. I took a slow, deep sip of my morning coffee, looking out over the sprawling city skyline. My phone was quiet. My bank accounts were secure. The dark, suffocating cloud of secret obligation was gone forever. I had fought a silent, brutal war for 4 years, and I had finally, definitively won.